Hey guys, Matt with CJ Off-Road here. Today we're going to be working on our 2015 Chevy Silverado, and we're going to be installing some performance suspension components by Falcon. Now today we've got in front of me on the table the Falcon suspension leveling kit fitting your 2014 through 18 Chevy Silverado as well as GMC Sierra 1500 series. Now this kit includes everything that you need to get it bolted up onto your truck and drastically improve the on and off-road performance of your vehicle. Now you want this for your truck if you do a lot of towing. Based on the rear shocks, it's going to definitely improve the dampening and suspension performance of your factory vehicle. Then up front here you do have a new strut shock which goes in between your factory spring, and you can adjust the ride quality based on this ring on the bottom. It also includes billet top hats, which is going to really improve the ride, as well as bump stops and new bump stop brackets for the rear to make sure you don't overextend those shocks. Now we've got our 2015 up on the lift. I'm going to go ahead and get started and show you guys how to install this kit. So as you can see, we removed the wheel and tire on the front end of our Silverado, and that takes a 22mm socket, depending on what lug nuts you have. Now the first thing we want to do when we're going underneath here is disconnect the ABS sensor in the back. We can pull that out with a trim removal tool, and then we'll just use a small pick to pop it off here and disconnect it. The next thing you want to do is remove the sway bar nut. This is a 15mm nut, and on the bottom, this stud that goes all the way through, you will have to hold on to as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and get that removed using a 15mm ratchet wrench. Then after you get the sway bar out, the next thing you want to do is remove the tie rod nut. It's down here and it's going to be held on by a 21mm nut. As you can see, this one wasn't on too tight, so. And I like to leave these on just by a thread or so, that way we can tap on it and let it fall down. Now if the nut seems like it's spinning too easily, the stud might be spinning with it, so you can't see that inside a socket. So what you need to do is grab a 21mm wrench and a 10mm socket, and then you can see it's actually loosening up. So just a word of the wise, if it seems like it's too easy and not really going anywhere, this is what you got going on. I'm just going to leave that on by a thread or so. And we can go ahead and remove our upper A-arm. Now it's kind of hard to see, but it is an 18mm nut right below this stud down here. Just remove it. I have a ratcheting wrench, so it's a little bit quicker, but you can fit a socket back there. I like to also leave this on a thread or so, and then give the actual knuckle here a tap with a hammer. That way it drops and still holds and doesn't go all over the place. So we've got a couple threads on there. I'm gonna give it a tap with a hammer to get this to pop off of it. So now that we have the A-arm and the tie rod disconnected, we can now unbolt the lower part of the strut. We're gonna use a 15mm socket, and we're gonna go from the bottom to the top. So I sprayed both sides with PB to make the threads a little bit easier. What we're gonna do is just go ahead and loosen those up. That's what the bolt will look like. We're gonna go ahead and pull the other one out. In order to let this whole assembly drop, we do need to remove the nut from the bottom of the tie rod, and I'm just going to pull it out of there and just thread it right back where it was. And then to make this completely drop, we've got to use that 18mm and loosen this nut up here, and then the whole thing will fall, and we can loosen up the top of the strut and pull the whole assembly out. Now one warning too, just make sure you're clear of all this when it does go to fall. This assembly will drop a little bit, so just don't be too close to it. You know, you don't want to have this thing drop on your head or anything like that, especially if you're on jack stands. Don't be doing this with this above your head. So just always stay clear of the heavy assemblies. We'll see what happens when we pop this out. There we go. That wasn't too bad, but obviously if your head or something was underneath there, that wouldn't have been too good. Now in order to get the strut assembly out, we've already got it disconnected down below, but up top there are 3 nuts that hold onto the studs in the top. We're gonna remove those with an 18mm ratchet wrench. Since we have all 3 nuts out, we can remove the strut. So with the entire strut assembly out, what you're gonna need to do is take this to a professional shop that has a spring compressor. You're not gonna be able to do this with one of the ones you have at home because these springs are so thick and they do hold a ton of weight. So what a wall-mounted one will do is hold this down and allow you to remove the top hat of this, alleviating the pressure, pull that bottom shock out, and put the new one in. Now, we're personally gonna take ours to a shop as well. We don't have a wall-mounted spring compressor here, so we're gonna take it to a shop, a good friend of ours, and get it all done and then show you guys what it looks like when it's done. So if you do take this to a shop, make sure you have them drill this out to a 1/2 inch on the top hat. That'll allow for the stud on the new Falcon shock to go through there. But they're gonna need to do that while it's all apart, just an extra step for them to do. And make sure you take it to a qualified shop because these things are definitely dangerous to work with and you wanna make sure that you're safe when working on them. So here you go, guys. We've got the Falcon shock inside of our strut and it's all done up. Now make sure you have the Zerk fitting facing the outside, and then we're gonna go ahead and set this in the exact same way it came out. After you have it in, we're gonna reinstall the nuts up top, but we're not gonna tighten them down all the way yet. So the reason we used a small ratchet strap was in order to pull this upwards and get it back onto the A-arm. Now what I did is I just tightened this down a little bit with the factory nut. I'm gonna go ahead and put my tie rod back in, get the ABS back connected, and put our sway bar link in before I get this completely tightened down. But I am gonna make sure to put the bolts back down through here and use the included nuts to get these tightened up. All right, guys, you can see we've got pretty much everything snugged up here. The only things you really have to focus on are the sway bar links, your upper ball joint nut, and your tie rod nut. Obviously, you have to tighten up the strut at the top and the bottom, but other than that, it's pretty simple. Repeat the exact same process of when you pulled it off and just put it all back on. Remember, you will need an alignment on the front end after you do this, but for now, we're gonna hop onto the rear and I'll show you how to get that done. Now, once you're finished up with the front, we're gonna move on to the rear. The only tools you need is a 21mm socket and a 21mm box wrench. We're gonna remove the lower bolt holding on the factory shock. Pull that out, and we're gonna keep that because we will be reinstalling it. And then the upper bolt is actually really way up high. You'll just have to go up there and only use the 21mm socket because the nut on the back is welded on. And with the top bolt out, we can remove the factory shock. So with the old shock out, grab your new Falcon shock and make sure the shaft end is up. Go into the hole. You may need to compress it and then put the bolt in while it's going down like we did. That's an easier way. Plus it does help to have a buddy there who can do it. It is slow to come back down, so if you take your time, you just have to put the bolts in really quick to make sure it stays. So those are both in. Now you want to torque both of these down to 85 foot-pounds. Okay. Now we are going to have to remove this bump stop to install the Falcon provided bump stop, and in order to do that, grab an extension and a 10mm socket because there is a bolt that goes up through into the frame. And you can pull the old bump stop out. Bump stop adapter on with the provided bolt and put a little blue Loctite on there. And we do want to make that Falcon logo out because you didn't buy a Falcon suspension to not show it off. Here we go. Now we can install the provided Falcon bump stop. Now after you put that bump stop in, repeat the exact same process both for the front and the back. Throw your wheels and tires back on and take your vehicle for a professional alignment and you'll be good to go. Well, that's going to be a wrap on this Falcon suspension system for your 2014 to 18 Chevy Silverado and GMC Sierra. Now when we put our struts in, we opted to go to the leveling notch. You can do a couple different notches, including a stock ride height or a heavy accessory or even a couple other different configurations for it. It did take us a little bit of time because we had to take the strut to a qualified mechanic and make sure that they could get it on a wall-mounted strut compressor and make sure we safely did it. Now, we did it over at the shop with them just to watch how they did it, and we're probably gonna get one installed here at CJ's, but I highly recommend you take it to a shop. They're not gonna charge you too much, plus it'll be done the right way. Overall, I'd say about 3 to 4 hours to get this entire thing installed on your truck. The rear end was super easy, and it doesn't really take that many tools. I really think this thing's gonna ride a whole lot better, especially when you're out on the trail or on some of those back roads. Now, if you guys are interested in checking out any of the great Falcon suspension components for your Jeep or your truck, be sure to visit us at cjponyparts.com. Hope you enjoyed that video. To stay up to date on our CJ Off-Road videos, make sure to subscribe up top here, and for any other installs, make sure to click the link right above.